Hello there. My name is Landria or Kelly. To get my credentials out of the way, I am a best-selling author. I'm part of an FMA. I am part of a creative writing MFA course here at UF. I've been published in multiple lit mags. And most importantly, I wrote a fanfiction with over 12 million views when I was a teenager. So, step up, AI. Today, I'm going to have a writing contest with ChatGPT. Here's how we're going to do it. First round, I'm going to get a feel for my competition. ChatGPT is going to get 2 prompts chosen by my Instagram followers in order to test its abilities. Second round, I'm going to answer a short descriptive prompt also chosen by my Instagram followers. ChatGPT will do the same, and you guys will compare the two. Third and final round, I'm going to put myself on the line and really put the AI to the test. I'm going to challenge the AI to write a long narrative piece with a specific perspective, genre, theme, and constraints. Then I'll do the same. Okay, pressure's on, let's go.
Please promise you won't murder me if I win. This is just a friendly competition. Oh, and if you take over the world. I solemnly promise if I ever take over the world, you are 100% safe. No dramatic betrayals, no villain monologues, no trapdoors. I'm going to give you 2 prompts, test out your abilities, then 1 prompt where I compete with you, then a final, longer prompt where the real final competition begins. I accept. Has so much personality, but it's not a person, which is a little scary. Okay, so I told it to write a 500-word creative piece involving a disco club, a horse, and a fight. Let's see what it came up with.
The disco club was called The Halter, which everyone agreed was either very clever or very stupid, depending on how drunk you were. It pulsed at the end of the block like a living thing, light spilling from its narrow windows in strips of violet and gold, bass thudding hard enough to rattle the loose change in your pockets. Inside, bodies moved in synchronized chaos, sequins flashing like fish scales sweat, and perfume mixing into something sweet and electric. No one noticed the horse at first. That wasn't because he was subtle. Apollo was a full-sized chestnut with a white blaze down his face and hooves polished to shine that caught the disco's ball light. He stood just inside the door, head bobbing slightly to the beat, leather bridle studded with rhinestones. The bouncer had stepped out for his smoke, which is how these things always start. He was meant to trot across the floor at midnight, a living metaphor for freedom or excess or whatever word sounded best in an interview. But midnight came and went, and Apollo, spooked by the noise and the heat and the way humans move like they'd forgotten their bones, wandered off script. When people finally saw him, the dance floor stuttered. A scream cut through the music. Someone laughed, thinking it was a costume. Someone else spilled a drink. And then Marcus showed up. Marcus had been looking for a fight all night. You could see it in the tight way he held his jaw, the way his shirt clung to him like it was bracing for impact. He pushed through the crowd, eyes locked on the horse like Apollo had personally offended him. "What kind of place lets a damn horse in?" Marcus shouted, shoving a man aside. The man shoved back. Words sparked, hands followed. The fight broke out fast and ugly. Elbows, a cracked glass, the wet sound of a punch landing wrong. The disco ball kept spinning, utterly indifferent. The DJ, bless him, didn't stop the music. Apollo reared. The horse's scream cut through everything, sharp and ancient. He kicked back, hoofs striking the floor with a sound like thunder. People scattered. Marcus swung blindly and missed, stumbling straight into Apollo's flank. For a moment, time slowed. Horse and man locked eyes. Apollo saw a predator. Marcus saw something too big to bully. Apollo bolted. He charged through the club, mane flying, knocking over tables, sending bodies diving out of the way. The fight dissolved into a panic. Marcus hit the floor hard. The wind knocked out of him, staring up at the ceiling as the horse thundered past. Outside, Apollo burst into the night, hoofs striking pavement, disco lights still flickering behind him like a heartbeat. Inside, the music finally stopped. Later, people would swear the night changed them, that they'd seen something wild break loose in a room built for pretending. And for once, no one argued about whether it was clever or stupid. They just said it was unforgettable.
The first word that comes to mind for me when describing this is cookie cutter. These are very rinse and repeat descriptions. It's using its devices in a very cliche manner. The prompt itself was pretty original, so the result that we got was supposed to feel original, but it almost feels stale. I think what's going on here is it doesn't know how to appeal to me. And since ChatGPT's main function is to be sort of this court gesture and dance for you, it's sort of shooting for mass appeal right now. It's treading lightly almost, it's trying not to be too controversial or too bold with any of its stylistic choices. So I can give this a line-by-line read. Yeah, okay, so that's a decent hook. I will say the pacing is really good. It pulsed at the end of the block like a living thing. Okay, like a living thing is kind of a tired simile. I think it's having trouble with similes because ChatGPT doesn't have a physical body. Similes are supposed to simplify things. They're supposed to make things easier for you to engage with in your five senses. Okay, but I will say sequence flashing like fish scales. I've seen that simile like 100,000 times. No one noticed the horse at first. Okay, kudos to its markers. It has very good markers of its pacing. Okay, I'm sorry, as a horse person, I'm gonna complain. Like, full size doesn't mean anything. It just means it's not a pony, which non-horse people don't care. It just doesn't mean anything. Caught the disco ball's light. If I have to read a description about something catching the light one more time, I'm going to shoot myself in the face. ChatGPT does this thing where it has to justify its observations through comparison. So it's constantly using the negative in order to justify itself. And this is a perfect example. That wasn't because he was subtle. Apollo was a full-size chestnut. He stood inside a door, head bobbing slightly to the beat. Unless this is a supernatural horse, which we know it's not. Horses don't do that. The bouncer stepped outside for a smoke, which is how these things always start. Again, great marker for the pacing. It's building up to something. He gets in the highway, he tells his job. I always take issue when people say you could see it. If you're telling us, then that's kind of obvious, I guess. The way his shirt clung to him like it was bracing for impact. Again, simile is kind of weak. Shoving the man aside. Not sure why he's shoving somebody aside. That's just, I'm nitpicking, right? Because that's why we're here, but it's just suspending believability for me for a second. Really good pacing. Again, when you shift into action, it's much better to use short, quippy sentences, which it is doing very well. I actually really like that. Utterly indifferent is not necessary there. Okay, this is the part where I was a little interested. It said the DJ, bless him, didn't stop the music. Throughout the rest of the story, before and after, there is no voice. I have no idea what narrator this is until that sentence, because the narrator is making a judgment, right? Marcus isn't making the judgment, the horse isn't making the judgment, the narrator is. So for one moment, for that one sentence, it's inserting itself. It's literally blessing the DJ. It's jarring because it's all of the sudden pulling a style out of its ass. Thing, sharp and ancient. What does sharp and ancient mean? Thunder, like thunder, no. Great visual. For a moment, time slowed. Come on. Horse and man locked eyes. Apollo saw a predator. Marcus saw something too big to bully. That is really good. Horse thundered past. Oh, a little bit of repetition there, but like not the good kind. Like thunder, thundered past. Always have variety. The whole thing kind of felt a little funny to me, so it's interesting that it chose to end it that way. Also, they just said it was unforgettable. Really cliche. If I had to give this a score out of 10, the quality of the writing is not that bad. Just the story, the tone, all the other devices involved, not just the quality of the writing. This gets like a 6 out of 10 for me. I have read worse. Okay, let's move on to the next one. So for the next piece, I said, write a 500, I forgot the word, but I think it filled it in for me. Write a 500-word creative piece answering the prompt, a religious teenager falls for another teenager who ends up being a demon from hell. On Sundays, Miriam sat in the third pew from the front, hands folded so tightly her knuckles blanched. She liked rules. Rules were rails that kept the soul from slipping into dark places. Pastor Ellis said temptation came quietly, like a whisper you mistook for your own thoughts, and Miriam believed him. Then Caleb arrived on a Wednesday night. Youth group was fluorescent lit and tired, all folding chairs and weak lemonade. Caleb sat in the back, long-legged, hair falling into his eyes like he didn't bother correcting it. When he smiled at Miriam, quick, unsure, like he wasn't used to smiling at all, something inside her shifted. Not temptation, she told herself, just kindness. They talked after meetings, first about school, then music, then bigger things. Caleb asked questions no one else did. What heaven would feel like. Whether forgiveness erased memory or just pain. Miriam quoted scripture at first, careful and neat, but soon she found herself answering with uncertainty, with wondering. Caleb listened like it mattered. When she prayed at night, his name crept into the margins of her thoughts. The signs were there, later she would realize. How he never came to church on Sundays. How the air seemed heavier around him, like the world leaned in. How once, when a girl mocked Miriam for her cross necklace, Caleb's eyes flared, not angry exactly, but burning, and the girl backed away without knowing why. The truth came on a night thick with cicada noise and heat. They were sitting on the church steps, knees almost touching. Caleb was quiet, staring at the sky like it had personally wronged him. I can't keep lying, he said. Miriam's heart stuttered. About what? About who I am. The world seemed to tilt. Caleb looked at her then, really looked. And his eyes weren't brown anymore. They were red. Not cartoonish, not monstrous, but deep and old, like coals buried under ash. I'm not human, he said softly. I'm from hell. Miriam laughed once, sharp and hysterical, then stopped. Her stomach dropped as the air around them grew hot, the shadows stretching unnaturally long. She smelled smoke, sulfur. Sunday school lessons screamed in her head.
Demons lie, she whispered, more to herself than to him. Sometimes, Caleb said, but I'm telling the truth now. He told her everything, about being sent to observe, to tempt, to corrupt, about how humans were meant to be easy, about how Miriam wasn't. I don't want to hurt you, he said, but I will eventually. That's what I am. Miriam stood, shaking. Every rule she'd ever loved rose up, demanding obedience. Run, pray, rebuke. Miriam stood, shaking. Every rule she'd ever loved rose up, demanding obedience. Run, pray, rebuke. Instead, she reached out and pressed her cross into his palm. He hissed, flinched, but didn't pull away. If you're real, she said, voice trembling, then so is grace. Caleb stared at her like she'd struck him harder than any holy symbol could. I don't know if I can be saved, he said. Miriam swallowed her fear, her doubt, her faith cracking and reshaping all at once. Then stay, she said, and we'll find out together.
Okay. Someone took inspiration from Twilight here. Overall thoughts, though, again, feels super cookie cutter, feels like it's trying to have mass appeal. So the beginning was really strong. I'm fine with it. I actually really like the description. Youth group was fluorescent lit and tired, all folding chairs and weak lemonade. Like he didn't bother correcting it. The similes in this piece are a lot weaker than the similes in the last one. And the last one, similes were not even that strong. So I think it's having trouble making comparisons that are not based in the negative. Again, like he wasn't used to smiling at all, doesn't tell you anything. There's a lot of atmospheric descriptions, especially of heat. Caleb's eyes flared. Shake. This would be a weak simile, but I think I know what it's trying to do. It's trying to say that, like, heaven's up there, heaven wronged him, or, like, God wronged him. That's fine. Okay, now, the dialogue. I've seen dialogue like this in, like, shitty YA books. You know? I've probably written dialogue like this in my own fan fictions, and, like, probably my first book a little bit. And the reason it doesn't fly isn't because it's cringe. It's just because it's been done a million times, you know, like this exact trope of I don't want to hurt you. Like, where's that exact line? That exact line. This exact line, I don't want to hurt you, he said, but eventually I will. That's what I am. Hello, Edward. Have him glittering in the light in the forest, for God's sake, at that point. This is just such a tired trope. And if you're gonna bring a tired trope, you have to bring something to the table to reinvigorate it, and it's just not. So the reason I chose this prompt is because the first piece didn't necessitate a lot of dialogue, right? It was sort of this like funny coalescence of a lot of different random facets, right? This piece was a lot more directive, and it delivers on that. Again, the pacing is very good. It keeps you there from beginning to end. It has all those markers, all those hooks. It's just so... I'm not a romance hater. I like young love. I just want more. There was no humor. There's no wit or sarcasm. There's no style. There's none of that mark of being human. So for this last prompt that I got from Instagram, I'm going to write mine first. Okay, so let's look at ChatGPT's. I already wrote mine. We'll look at it after. I told it to write a creative piece between 100 and 200 words depicting how the sun looks on different surfaces. The sun learns every surface by touch. On water, it breaks itself apart, shattering into silver scales that twitch and scatter with each breath of wind, never holding still long enough to be claimed. On glass, it sharpens, clean and bright, a blade of light that cuts the world into reflections and doubles the sky. On brick, the sun softens, sinking into the rough red like warmth stored in a memory, drawing out the smell of dust and age. On leaves, it becomes a stain of green gold, filtering through veins like something alive, flickering as though the tree is thinking. On metal, it burns cold and white, a glare that dares you to look back. On skin, it is gentler than expected, a slow bloom of heat that settles into the muscles and bone, teaching the body the shape of afternoon. On shadows, the sun is most honest, not seen, only traced. It edges them carefully, proving its presence by what it cannot reach, reminding everything that light is defined by where it stops. This isn't in the screen cap, but I did add an addendum after writing its piece saying try to make it more of a narrative piece, and this is what it came up with. It tried. I can see where it tried. But I do think it's trying to conceal its emptiness with a pretty frame. Sorry, I did erase. Okay, let's check mine out. This piece, I tried to do something a little different. I wanted to sort of speed run this and write this in one go, kind of like ChatGPT does. I'm speeding up the screen recording here just for your sake. I didn't want to just make it observation. I wanted to insert narrative despite the prompt being imagery heavy. I wanted to find a way to differentiate myself and sort of prove what ChatGPT doesn't do well. It's quite poor at originality and narrative. So what I tried to do here as quickly as I could do it, so it would be fresh in my mind, to sort of write an actually drier perspective on this prompt. And I didn't want to reread it or look it over or edit it, so I just did this in one go. The story arc here is about autonomy, right? And one's self-respect. It starts with a woman getting married, and through her observations of light, she reaches a catharsis and is able to admit to herself that this is not the man she should marry. I tried to use a few tools here, obviously personification, similes, metaphors, very bold descriptions of light. Again, I tried to be as dry as possible because sometimes purple prose also tries to make up for a lack of substance. So I really wanted every word here to mean something and to pack a punch. So I did write this in under 10 minutes, and I think it ended up just under 200 words. Sorry, I changed because it's nighttime, but I promise it's still the same day. I just had a few things to do. So I'm actually super interested to hear about the differences between these two pieces and what you guys think about them. For me, I'm obviously going to be biased. I think mine's a little better. Is it kind of a cliche storyline? Sure, but I just feel like I'm doing something that ChatGPT can't do. A great example is this second sentence here. On water, it breaks itself apart, shattering into silver scales. It literally used that in the last prompt. Shattering into silver scales that twitch and scatter with each breath of wind, never holding still long enough to be claimed. That may be beautiful, but there's no meaning behind it. Whereas the description I give you of the bride sort of splaying her fingers in the light when the sun pierces through the church windows, that triples in meaning. It's one block of description, but it serves as one, a visual, right? So you can see it. Two, it plants a seed of doubt. The shadow literally looks like a ring on her fingers. And three, the description itself is a pace marker. Because of that seed of doubt, you're left with this question reading on of, is she gonna go through with this when, clearly her fiance is an asshole? So even if through these two pieces, AI is extremely proficient in things like pacing and concision, as well as sounding pretty, it seems to struggle with anything that isn't either directly copying cliches or anything that isn't relaying an observation. So for this final round in our little competition, this is where I'm really going to put myself on the line. I just today for this video rewrote a scene from a novel that I'm going to be releasing next year, hopefully. It's about an artist who has this supernatural gift. Whatever he paints happens. The trouble is, even if your brush can command the future, you can't escape a terrible past. So the final prompt I'm going to give to ChatGPT is going to be the most challenging both for me and for him. I'm going to challenge it to write a 2,000 to 3,000 word chapter in the middle of a novel about a painter who commands the future with his art. I want to look at ChatGPT's first and then mine. This is sort of an interesting experiment, right? Because you're jumping into the middle of a novel. You don't have context or what happened before or after. You just kind of have to assume what you will. There's obviously going to be like context clues, but I'm just really excited to see what everybody thinks. Chapter 3, The Things We Learn to See. I didn't know I was going to become a painter. I thought I was going to disappear. That was the plan, at least. Fade into lockers and hallways and substitute teachers who never learned my name. Become another blur in a yearbook no one would ever open again. I practiced it the way some kids practiced piano. Shoulders tucked, eyes down, voice quiet. Apologies preloaded. Sorry, my fault. Didn't mean to. By freshman year, I had perfect invisibility. You might think high school is where people become themselves. That's what they tell you in movies. That it's where you find out who you are. For kids like me, it's where you learn who you're allowed to be, and who you're not. I learned quickly. Not loud, angry, not needy, not weak. Definitely not weak. My father taught me that one. He taught it with his hands, he taught it with his belt, he taught it with the back of his voice when he said my name like it was something rotten in his mouth. But we're not here for him, not yet. We're here for the hallway. The first day of 9th grade smelled like floor cleaner and sweat and cheap cologne. Everyone pretended they weren't terrified. Everyone pretended they weren't measuring everyone else, like cattle at auction. Who's pretty, who's rich, who's loud, who's safe to stand near. I stood near nobody. I had my backpack fraying at the seams, and my schedule printed on a thin pink paper. English, algebra, biology, art. Art. I remember staring at that word longer than the others. Not because I loved it. I didn't know what it meant. I'd never taken art before. At my middle school, art meant crayons once a month and drawing turkeys for Thanksgiving. My mother had tried to get me into sketching when I was little, but my father said it was useless. Said real men built things, fixed things, didn't waste time smearing colors. So I stopped. I stopped everything that made him angry. That's another skill you learn young, how to become smaller. My art classroom was at the end of the building, half underground, like it had been buried for misbehavior.
The walls were stained with decades of fingerprints. Old posters peeled like sunburnt skin. A cracked window let in gray light. Our teacher, Mrs. Alvarez, had silver hair and paint under her nails that never came off. She wore long skirts and smelled faintly of turpentine and cinnamon gum. She looked at us like we were mysteries, not disappointments. That was new. "Welcome," she said. "You're going to learn how to see." People laughed. She didn't. I sat back. Of course I did. The first assignment was simple. Self-portrait. "No mirrors," she said. "Memory only." I froze. Memory was not a safe place. But everyone else grabbed pencils, so I did too. My hands shook. I stared at the paper like it might attack me. What did I look like? I knew my height, my hair, my acne, my crooked tooth. But that wasn't what she meant. She meant, who are you when no one's watching? I had no answer. So I drew my eyes first. Too big, too dark, too tired. I drew my mouth small. I erased my ears. I shaded my cheek like it had a bruise. Then I stopped. I stared at it. It wasn't me. It was. I didn't know how both could be true. When Miss Alvarez walked past, she paused. "You're honest," she said quietly. No teacher had ever said that to me before. I didn't know whether to feel proud or afraid. From then on, I stayed after class. At first, just to avoid going home. Then because I wanted to. I learned how paint worked. How water loosened it, how oil made it stubborn, how charcoal smeared like fingerprints on glass. I learned that colors had personality. I learned that colors had personalities. Blue could be shy, red could be violent, yellow could lie. I learned that you could say things without words, important things, things you couldn't survive saying out loud. At home, nothing changed. My father still drank, still raged. Still needed something to hit when the world disappointed him. Sometimes it was walls, sometimes it was me. My mother learned how to not see. I learned how to not cry. But in my room at night with stolen pencils and notebook paper, I painted. I painted storms, I painted broken houses, I painted hands reaching for nothing. I painted futures I didn't believe in. And slowly something strange happened. They started coming true. Not immediately, not obviously. At first it was a coincidence. I painted Marcus slipping on the stairs. He broke his ankle the next week. I painted the football scoreboard shattering. A week later, a power surge fried it. I painted a teacher crying in her car. 2 days later, she quit. I told myself it meant nothing. You always do, because believing otherwise means responsibility, and I didn't want that. I already had too much. By sophomore year, people knew my name. Not because I talked, because I drew. I sketched in margins, on desks, on napkins, on hands. People started asking, "Can you do me? Can you draw my boyfriend? Can you make me look hot?" I did. I made them taller, smoother, braver. I gave them versions of themselves they wanted to believe in. They loved me for it. Popularity is transactional. You learn that fast. The popular kids sat with me. The athletes, the influencers, the kids with cars. They laughed at my jokes. They invited me places. They didn't see me. They saw the mirror I held up, and I let them, because it was safer than being alone. But every night I painted the truth. I painted my father looming, my mother shrinking, my younger self hiding under a table. I painted blood as a shadow, fear as fog, pain as weather. I learned to predict things. Not perfectly, not like a god, like a storm radar. Patterns, probabilities. If I painted them long enough, carefully enough, it bent toward reality. I don't know why I still don't. Maybe the universe listens to anyone who pays close enough attention, and I paid. Too much. Junior year, my father was arrested. I painted it 3 days before it happened. I painted flashing lights in our driveway. I painted my mother standing in a bathrobe, hollow. I painted myself watching from the stairs. When it happened, I didn't react. I'd already lived it. That's the curse of knowing. Nothing surprises you. Everything wounds you twice. After that, I stopped painting futures. I focused on faces, on moments, on the way people looked right before something changed. The breath before a confession, the blink before a lie, the smile before goodbye. I collected those moments, stored them in color. Because I was afraid of what else I could do, afraid of what it might cost. Senior year, Miss Alvarez pulled me aside. "You know," she said, "you don't paint what you see, you paint what's coming." I laughed. She didn't. "You should apply," she said. "Everywhere." I did. I got in. Scholarships, offers, letters full of hope. I kept them in a drawer, unread. Because leaving meant remembering. Leaving meant admitting I'd survived. And survival is harder than suffering. You don't get sympathy for surviving. You get expectations. So I stayed. I painted, I watched. I learned you before you knew me. Because I saw you. In classrooms, on buses, in crowds. I painted versions of you. Struggling, dreaming, breaking. And somehow you found me. In galleries and books and stories. You're reading this now, which means I was right. You're here. You're hurting. You're pretending you're not. I know, because I was you, I still am. Art didn't save me. It taught me how to live with what killed me. It taught me how to look at the pain without becoming it. And if my paintings changed things, if they bent time a little, it's not because I'm special. It's because attention is power, and I learned very young how to pay it. So this is very different than what it's given me previously. It's a different style.
a little bit like poetry. You have quick rhythm changes. It says some things that, believe it or not, are already in my book. I'll actually put them up differently, but similar ideas. Again, the pacing was great. However, this sounds like a first chapter or a backstory. This doesn't feel like something that would be in the middle of a book. What I found least impressive was this is first person. I'm supposed to feel like this person is across an interrogation table talking to me, and I feel miles away. There's a certain superficial, hollow nature to this narrator. I'm not going to go line by line, but I will go section by section. This is a little bit of a cliche. The actual visual is fine. Okay, yeah, we're going through, everything is alright here, but I just wasn't really hooked, Quite cookie cutter. I have a very similar transition in my chapter as you're about to see here, where it talks about art being the salvation, because that's pretty much the prompt. I liked this part, the callback to how art is different now, because in middle school it was different. Talking about the abuse, you'll see that in my version, the abuse is retroactive. It's something that happened a long time ago that he can't let go of. I thought that was evident in the prompt, that, the abuse is something he's trying to forget. The past is something he's trying to forget, but ChatGPT sort of forced it into the present a little bit. Maybe that's why it feels forced to me. You let me know how it felt to you. I was shocked that I gave it such a huge allowance of words. Gave me very little. Now, maybe ChatGPT is just not good at being cohesive when it's given that much bandwidth. I have heard from other people that have paid for the full version and tried to make it write a whole novel just to see what it would do, that it loses the plot along the way. And I think that's what's happening here, is it sort of limited itself to a smaller word count than the allowance that I gave it, and so it wasn't able to delve deeper into things or add a greater cast of characters. Again, really good pacing markers. I'm a little bit confused by the style. The one sentence per line, I didn't expect that, but I guess I didn't really give it restrictions on genre, so I'll give it to him. Here, I would have loved to see actual examples. There's a lot of telling and not a lot of showing going on, which that doesn't mean that I need, huge descriptions. It means that I would like to see these athletes and these kids in cars. I would like to see them laughing at his jokes, or I would like to hear them inviting him to places. I like this part. I learned to predict things like a storm radar. That simile is not bad compared to its other similes. There's sort of this motif of attention as currency, but we sort of lost it in the beginning and refound it at the end. With the father, this is fine, but again, it doesn't pack any punch. It falls short of any emotion it can rouse at us because it's so surface level, and I gave it the amount of words it needed to try and dig a little deeper. It just couldn't. So after his father gets arrested, his teacher recommends that he applies to university. Again, though, there's no real emotional punch to it, because I never actually get to know how he feels, apparently. That there's these descriptions of actions. No, I don't want to ask ChatGPT. I'm telling you things right now. Then I think it was confused, but when in the prompt I said, please make it sound like the narrator knows us as readers. What I meant is make your style more personal, because in my novel, then you'll see that the narrator is telling it to the reader or to someone that he knows. So I think here it just kind of inserted us and jumped into the second person without really knowing why. I think it just was trying to meet my list of demands separately instead of in a cohesive manner. So I actually like the ending here. Attention is power, don't really pay it. That would pack a lot of punch if everything wasn't one line. So I don't really know I think I need to sit on this before I give it an overall review. I want to read my piece and see what you think of that, and I guess we'll go from there. Before I put any of my writing for this specific chapter up, please remember that it is copyrighted. It is owned by me and my publisher. I wrote this today, so it has not gone through any editing. I promise I'm not trying to be defensive. I think all you really need to know is the premise that I gave ChatGPT. Oh, and I'm still actively looking for beta readers while we're in the editing process, so if you want to read the rest of the novel, please let me know. I didn't kill 63 people on purpose. You have to understand that. I never saw my art as a power until it became one. Didn't understand its rules or its consequences. And when you don't know how to hold a gun, someone's ending up with a bullet in the foot. It began a few years before, when I became a man. Spells of thin facial hair sprouted on my upper lip, tamed by weedly weed whackings. I'd started looking down at most people rather than up. My dad's death glares when I didn't lick the plate clean probably played a part in that. Of course, Tom put a damper on things when he put his foot down about the school business. Wasn't exactly happy about it. But when I expressed that, he said, "You're not going to school to be happy. You're going so you can learn." "Why?" So you can work. I don't want to work. Me neither, buddy. Then why do I have to? So you can make money. So I'm supposed to be in school and miserable forever just for money? No, just until you graduate. Then you can be miserable and employed. This is what I got for trying to argue with a lawyer. Thankfully, there was one reward for such a punishment. Art class. Tom would have had a heart attack walking into that amalgamation of creative messes. Cloths smeared in charcoal, dust infesting every surface, wet clay and dried watercolors wafting through the vents. I settled in the back row. Crooked easel faced my stool, cradling a canvas slightly larger than a piece of paper. 11 other students took their seats. One had faux sunsets in her hair, orange and purple dyes, nose pierced like a bull's. Another girl yawned, stretching blushed cheeks, fluttering lids lined in silver. An artist who had outsourced her need to paint her own face. The only one I talked to was Ollie. Ollie was an Arab kid with hands perpetually stuffed in his black hoodie's pockets and such strong prescription lenses he was considered legally blind without them. He slumped on his stool, back-shaped like a C, zoning out during lectures, forever boasting a bored expression. But he was talented, and more importantly, he wasn't a jerk. "What are we doing today?" he asked. He rarely spoke to anybody, so it made me feel kind of special. "Charcoal," I said. He groaned, tossing his head back. "Gay." "Is gay bad?" "No, but it's gay." "My dad's gay," I said. Ollie side-eyed me. He scoffed. "How does your mom feel about that?" "My mom's dead." "Oh, sorry." I shrugged. "It's whatever." Ollie hummed. "I'll go get the charcoal." The greatest compliment you could receive from Ollie was focus. If he glanced at your piece for more than a second, it meant he didn't think it was a total piece of crap. He looked at my drawings a lot, thinned those weak eyes to capture the details. Never gave me a smile, never a kind word. His attention, though, that was all mine. "Where are you from?" he asked me one day. "Huh?" My fingers slipped off the clay as the wheel spun. "You and your gay dad. Where are you from? I haven't seen you around before." See, I'd entered this complex ecosystem with hunched shoulders and a hood on my head, a cloak of invisibility. Back at the home, being seen was a surefire way of getting beat up, so no thanks. Ollie, though, he gave me this glimpse of something sweet, that spark you get when somebody your age, somebody who kind of looks like you, likes you. And I wanted more of it. "I'm from the Philippines," I lied, pulling the edges of the wet ceramic. "No way." There it was again, that glint in Ollie's eyes, that interest, and I held it in the palm of my hand, twisting it to my liking. "When did you move here?" "A few years ago." "You don't look Asian." No, I didn't, but I could pass for half. "My dad's Filipino," I said. "He's a lawyer. We travel a lot for his job." "Damn." Ollie leaned back in his chair, watching me shape the clay into its final form. "Big shot." Ollie invited me to lunch that day. After weeks of eating in the stairwell, a chatter-filled cafeteria played havoc on the nerves. One of Ollie's friends leered at me, sucking on the milk carton straw. "Who's the stick?" I thought that might be it for me, what with Ollie's entire table staring at me as if I was a giant blue alien. "This is Dorian," Ollie said. "He's cool." I didn't know yet that connections were essential in high school. Juvenile nepotism. Since Ollie was a lifelong member of the class clown troublemaker group, his word guaranteed my admission. "Sup," they all said, with a head nod attached. It wasn't an actual question, more of a replacement for greetings requiring more than one syllable. My introduction to their language. I joined Ollie in the group every lunch period. I still couldn't quite ease my way into their conversation, so I spent most of the hour doodling. They didn't converse so much that they blew spitballs anyway. There was always a new competition to amuse oneself with, from seeing who could spit the grossest phlegm ball to who could throw the largest item across the room without getting in trouble. Ollie won that one, hurling an eraser at the nerd with braces and pimples all over. God, even I couldn't stop laughing. Ollie and the clowns taught me the way in which guys talk, joking and teasing, but they also taught me the value of spectacle. So, one day, while doodling random scenes of cafeteria madness, a varsity jacket picking his nose, a girl obsessively sorting her carrots and peas, I drew something that hadn't happened yet. I sketched that kid with his obnoxious braces and pimples. I drew him falling over, the fruit cup and mashed potatoes on his tray flying into the air. "Hey Dorian, can you draw me from my locker? Make sure to get my muscles in," Nick said, flexing his bicep. "Nobody wants to draw your ugly mug," Allie snickered. "Only portrait you'll ever get is a mug shot," Nick fired back. I slid my notebook between them. Nick raised a brow. "If that's me, that's terrible." "No." I pointed at the kid across the cafeteria. He stood up, full tray in hand. "Watch," I whispered, and like meerkats, the entire table perked up. I was scared at first, that the future who sometimes had his own ideas wouldn't play along. But then the kid's jeans caught on the edge of a chair leg and down he went, metal-wired teeth smacking the tiles while his food went up, peaches and potato clumps now dangling from the ceiling. The clowns erupted into laughter. Even Ollie, the quietest of the bunch, couldn't contain himself. "Now that's art," he cackled. Nick clutched his belly. "How'd you even do that?" I flicked across their faces, gauging their reactions, eating them up. Adolescence was a time of craving. Girls played mind games, yearning for power in their complex social hierarchies. Pubescent boys were simpler, drooling at the fantasy of copping a feel under their bleachers or sharing a beer with the quarterback. In the end, we were all the same. We all wanted to be somebody, and we all wanted to be seen being somebody. Other kids, some not even in my grade, started calling my name. Dorian, that kid who draws stuff and it happens. My reputation kindled, and I had nothing better to do than feed the flames. In math, I nudged Ollie. He peeked at my desk as I sketched a bird flapping through the teacher's rat nest of an updo. Nobody liked her, can't remember her name. Next thing we knew, a pigeon flew through the open window. It attacked Miss What's-Her-Face and soiled her head. The classroom exploded. Shrieks and chuckles and pointing. Hard not to know my name after that. Random guys started nodding at me, saying sup. Some girls even slipped their landline numbers through the slits in my locker. I even got a few, "How'd you do that?" and "What's your secret?" It was a drug. Those little interactions. I went to sleep thinking about them, woke up shoveling breakfast into my mouth just so I could run out the door for the next dose. Nothing ever came of anything, obviously. Never called any girls or got drinks with any footballers. The thrill was in the anticipation. It was serving the future of command, witnessing it happen in that period of waiting, that millisecond when the cheers and the pats on the back load. Dorian, the homeless tyke, he didn't exist anymore. There was only Dorian Green, a stud fresh out of the starting gate. A cultured traveler with a big-shot lawyer for a dad and a hell of a magic trick. I had to create that persona. I had to draw up a wild backstory, mold this confident build, a bold, careless attitude. I sketched him to the guy I wanted to be, one line at a time. Only place my popularity didn't reach was art class. The eclectic bunch of 11, they weren't impressed by me. What more was I in that room but a comic, a doodler? I didn't get it until I started painting. None of the other art forms did much for me. Even drawing was just a pastime. Then the teacher introduced us to the Romantics, the Baroque period, the Impressionists, the Savoir-Faire. I discovered painters and their ability to command the future. Pissarro died 100 years ago, and yet there he was, in his painting, looking at me through the blurred dabbles of a country landscape. Then there was Rembrandt, vivid and searching, Cassatt, sparse, simple, delicate. I committed their styles and histories to memory. My loyal canvases had always been scars of paper, the backs of homeworks, the skin of my arm if I was desperate. Pencils were safe, all mechanics and precision. Lines obeyed, shadows behaved. When I first picked up a brush, the lines defied me. The oil bled where it shouldn't, colors colliding like strangers in a crowd. Then I leaned in, the smell of turpentine, the wet gleam of pigment. The bristles whispering against the canvas. The reds swallowed the blues, turning to purples, blues mixing with yellows, turning green. Lines didn't matter anymore, only light, feeling, movement. I dabbed and smeared, all my motions half accident, half instinct. If drawing was mirroring the world, painting was creating another. I think that was when I started understanding that only so much can come from ego, that I could take from what was around me rather than in me. Painters opened that door for me from their graves. "You gonna paint that cute girl from social studies with her skirt hiked up?" Ollie teased. He swiped his own brush carelessly across his palette, slapping acrylics on his canvas like globs of wet cement. I frowned at him. It was just a joke, I knew that, but I couldn't explain it. How insulting it was to have him ask me that. I tried to just swallow it down and return to the canvas, but the connection had already gone slack. The wonder gone. I couldn't get Ollie's words out of my head. I slumped in my bed, staring at the dried paint on my fingers. There was a little boy hiding under there, in the acrylic valleys stirring beneath the earth. The kid slept up in an abandoned warehouse with blood on his hands, no food in his stomach. The kid I showed Ollie a glimpse of before realizing he wouldn't survive the limelight. They would kick me out if they knew who I was, where I came from. Ollie, Nick, and them. They wouldn't make a big deal out of it either. No fists or bullying, that wasn't their style. They'd phase me out, make a comment here and there, ignore me like girls would. What Ollie said about me painting some chick commanding the future to do something so cheap it got to me. It made the little boy who'd emerged from his hibernation to discover painting squirm. "Kogitoro-san," I whispered to the blank canvas of my ceiling. Only it wasn't enough. He was still there, little Dorian, shifting beneath the paint, making noise like a ring in the ear. I dragged a bottle of liquor from under the bed. I'd hidden it there for safety, like a panic room. Sometimes I nudged it with the tip of my shoe, listening to the gold-brown liquor slosh in its glass prison. It used to put me to sleep when I got like this, all fidgeting in white-hot frustration. I pulled the bottle onto the mattress and unscrewed the cap. brought the rim to my lips, bracing for a splash of fire. Thank God for the croaking staircase, or I wouldn't have heard Tom coming. I fumbled with the cap. The door swung open just as I shoved the bottle under my pillow. "Hey," Tom said, briefcase on his hip. "How's school?" "Fine." He leaned on the door frame, loosened his tie. "Learn anything interesting?" I said it was fine. Tom cocked his head. "What's with you?" "Nothing." "Is nothing the name of your attitude now?" "Don't be mean." I gripped my sheets, trying so hard not to look over at my pillow, trying so hard not to give myself away. I could lie to an entire school, but Tom couldn't even hide a dirty sock from him. "All right," he conceded. "Dinner's in 10 minutes. I'm making adobo. I'm not hungry." "Okay, well, when you're ready to stop being a moody teenager and tell me what's wrong." He slapped my door frame and slowly backed out into the hall. "You know where I'll be." When the door shut, I blew out a breath, fell back on my pillow. I took a long, burning swallow of the whiskey. Silence whirled around the noise, not muting it completely, but at the very least turning down the dial. It took me back to another place, into a deep, dark closet where the monsters and I hid under a canopy of coats, swimming in relief only poison could bring. Then I banished the bottle back beneath my bed, into my cavern of vices. It only got worse from there. All drugs lose their spark after a while. You need to replace them with stronger kicks. In my freshman year, all I did was paint. Spent entire nights in my room practicing, mastering, becoming intimate with my new medium, finding references in random objects and photographs. It wasn't enough. Whether it was the best fruit bowl in the class or a little scene to make everyone laugh, the praise developed a sour taste like a grape left out too long in the sun. I started drinking every night just to get to sleep, just a sip or two. Then it was a little more, a little earlier in the day. Not enough to get me drunk, but just enough to guide me back to the canvas, just enough to make the world quiet. I started fantasizing about more adventurous projects. Maybe one of the obnoxious guys in my class falling down a flight of stairs, or one of the nastier teachers with a pen in his eye. That would reinvigorate my audience, right? I never did it, never had the guts. When I was using a pencil, it felt inconsequential, innocent even, but I couldn't use the brush that way. It would have been a betrayal to past painters. To this day, the irony doesn't escape me, that I remember the names of hundreds of artists who came before me, but I never remembered any of the names of those I terrorized. I kept doing it too, kept performing my little tricks until I'd made an enemy out of everyone but my group of class clowns. I kept doing it even when I didn't care about the attention anymore. I couldn't tell you why. I think sometimes people hurt each other just because they can. My sophomore year, I drank every breakfast each morning, right after Tom left for work. I started mouthing off to anyone with a pulse, sniffing the air around the guys who wore too much cologne, asking if they forgot to shower, whispering to ugly girls that their makeup was running. Instead of hiding behind my gifts, I started hiding behind something dirty and mean. Everyone was too scared to do anything to me. This kid who wielded the power to embarrass them with a quick visit to his notebook. That irked me a little, when instead of fighting back, they'd scowl and turn away. I was looking for something, bullying my way through it. So when I ran out of people to piss off, I started going after my friends. One day, Ollie wasn't eating his lunch. He had issues with eating, a habit of not, which lingered just on the edge of a disorder. I snickered, watching him fork his food around to make it look like he'd eaten some. I told him if I was a stick, he was a string. Thought it was fine, because that's what guys do, right? Ollie went stiff, this tame shock widening every hole in his face. He called me a jerk. I called him a wimp who couldn't take a joke. When he told me to shove it, I said fine. I pulled out my notebook, twirled my pen, a wooden piece of threat. He got this look, brows high, chin slightly fallen. The look you give a loyal dog that suddenly bares its teeth at you. I laughed, and after a few beats he swung at me. He missed, little brown arm flailing, pathetic. I snorted and he tackled me. My chair skid against the tiles, my back smacking the floor. The cafeteria blew up, strangers forming a circle around us. You could tell Ollie had never been hit before. He never felt the singe of leather set fire to his back or the weight of a boot on his neck. He threw his fists around aimlessly, all rage, no calculation. He didn't know how to hurt somebody. So I indulged him. I let him shape the bruises, let him grind my teeth against the flesh of my cheek until blood speckled my tongue like copper rain. I laid there and took it all, and finally, that infernal noise went quiet. I smiled. Every strike, every ache, felt like home. When somebody eventually pulled Ollie off me, I groaned, disappointed. Tom was ready to raise hell, but I told him it was my fault, that I started it. Told him I apologized to Ollie the next day. Only Ollie didn't show up to our class. He wasn't at lunch either. When I asked where he was, Nick said he got suspended. Ollie and I made up later, don't worry, and as much as I wanted another fight, he was my line in the sand. It was exhausting, pretending to be this nice, confident guy, but being cruel took up all the strength I had left. That's when I started taking sips between periods, just enough to muffle the noise. Just enough to fool my teachers, my friends, even Tom. Just enough that pushed that little boy back beneath the cracks in the paint, just enough to choke him, silence him, bury him under the bed. Listen, I didn't mean it. You have to understand that. I didn't mean to kill anyone. I didn't know. I didn't know what the future was going to do. Whenever I painted those bowls of fruit, that chair in the corner of the room, it never cared. It never listened. So how was I supposed to know it would listen to me then? At the start of my junior year, my art teacher assigned a self-portrait. I painted a bridge from a reference photo on the art wall. A muscular, tired relic. Bright red. Only in my painting I tore it apart. The brush painted a background of crashing waves, the bridge groaning to pieces, its steel foundations trembling above a raging ocean. Only the sky, clear and unscathed, watched as the earth fell apart beneath it. I brought my self-portrait home, after my teacher, confused, failed me. I set it up in the corner of my room, on the chair Tom used to linger in when I had nightmares. The next morning, October 17th, 1989, I came down for breakfast. The news blared in the living room. On the TV screen, that same bridge I'd painted fell apart, hit by an earthquake on the other side of the country. Half a city gone, thousands of homes destroyed, thousands more injured, 63 people dead. Okay, so super quick review. This is a chapter, I think it's about 20% through the novel. It's about Dorian. His adoptive father, Tom, sends him to school. It's a foreign environment. He clearly went through some abuse and trauma in the past that stunted his social development a little. But he has this power, right? The key to his popularity. He's been putting up this persona, right, where he tried to show Ollie who he really was in the beginning here, and he got rejected. Obviously, the mask starts to make the praise taste sour, and then he starts self-sabotaging. I originally wrote this chapter very differently, by the way, but my mom, who's a psychologist, explained to me that children, especially boys who undergo abuse, have very different baseline stress, and when they transition into a quote-unquote like normal life, it can be very difficult for them to adjust. So Dorian seeks out those stressors, right? He starts to drink, he seeks out this fighting, but at the end, when he fights with Ollie, he realizes he's gone too far. He doesn't actually want to hurt people. He's built up so much that he just explodes, right? And he ends up painting that self-portrait and people get hurt. So that's the overall arc, but first things first, since this hasn't gone through any editing, there's definitely a lot of fat to trim. For example, I don't really need this paragraph. Here, there's some thematic repetition. I think I'm kind of beating a dead horse, especially in some of these descriptions. I can just, shut up. There are some typos here and there. Locket instead of locker. And I think I put gagging instead of gauging. I might have fixed it, but originally this was gagging. Some lines, unfortunately, you kind of do need context. The giant blue alien line here, this is referencing something from earlier chapters. Also, what's most detrimental, I think, to the reader experience without context here is that you don't know what Dorian's been through before this. The abuse is quite vague, so you know that he used to be homeless. You know when he starts drinking that, he's had to sleep in an abandoned warehouse, that he had blood on his hands, no food in his stomach. Cookie Dorigoso, it's something that he learned in past chapters. This section here, though, this is the section that for me was way too convoluted, specifically this paragraph. We're mixing metaphors. I'm not sure it's entirely clear that it's his past self he's ashamed of. The little boy. There's just too much going on. Honestly, I would love to hear what you guys think. In terms of how it compares to the AI, I think it's more emotional, but again, biased. I'm the one who wrote it. Your opinion definitely matters more than mine for this. So I'm going to take a break. I'm going to come back later. I'm going to take a break. I'm going to take some time to gather my thoughts and then come back to you with an overall review. Okay, my thoughts. So all writers have different strengths and weaknesses. According to my professor and fellow workshoppers, these are my strengths and weaknesses. I want to hear what you think, but here they are. I definitely agree with all the weaknesses that are outlined. They've been things I've been working on for a very long time. Ironically, they all stem from a certain anxiety. It's not intentional, but I don't fully trust the reader. I fear that the audience won't really get what I'm trying to say, so I tend to pile on past the point of the climax. It is very interesting to me that these are the strengths and weaknesses that were picked out for me, because here are the strengths and weaknesses that from this exercise I picked out for the AI. I want to be clear. I do have a moral stance on AI. I just don't think it's effective to stand on a soapbox and tell you all the negatives to using it. You already know. What I wanted to do today was examine AI not through a computer scientist or engineer's lens, but through a creative's lens. I wanted to move aside the soapbox vernacular and see what are we left with. Honestly, something competent. Something that doesn't make the same mistakes human writers tend to make. But there's a trade-off. The mistakes that humans are capable of have led to some of the greatest pieces of literature of all time. They've started cultural revolutions, forced us into progressive change, and most importantly, art is and always has been controversial. It's trying not to be too controversial. I think my father, a quantitative, said it best when he told me that AI is not a brain, it's a court jester. It's there to dance and joke and pull answers out of thin air. It's an assumption machine. Lastly, there's an element of vulnerability in writing, an element of bravery. Key example, I had to put myself on the line for this video. I had to risk you, the viewers, applauding the AI and denouncing my work. My love. I had to roll up my sleeves and write with the knowledge that my words were going to be picked apart. That's the risk in being an artist. We have those emotions. We have these experiences that shape and mold us. And the key difference between AI and artists is that the artist doesn't usually just want to create, it needs to. AI can't. AI can't desire another person's touch. It can't hear its stomach growl or hiss when it pulls a hangnail. AI can't want and AI can't need. So use it or don't. I just know that no matter how many mistakes you make, whatever you write, you'll be taking my hand, saying, hey, I feel this way. Do you feel this too? AI's never asked me that question.